Good afternoon, welcome back to the shop. My name's Jamie. So today we're going to be working on aligning my lathe. It's been formerly was set up on some wood blocks, which made it very hard, if not impossible, to try and get the twist out of the lathe. And as I find myself doing a little bit better when it comes to accuracy and some of the measuring tools that I have identified that my lathe definitely needs a little bit of tweaking. So what we're going to do today is combine all of the videos that I've seen on YouTube and kind of give you a basic setup as to how to align your lathe. So first step with any good lathe alignment is to clean it. So let's get to it. Let's clean it up. Got a fair bit of chips here, nothing major, but we want to make sure that these ways are perfectly clean and that we've taken any variables out of the equation. If there's a chip underneath any of our measuring tools, that would be bad. So let's go ahead and clean this up. All right, the first step that we'll be doing for the lathe alignment is I want to check the accuracy of some of the tools I'll be using to align the lathe. So one will be these 1, 2, 3 blocks, which, as you can see by this one, it's brand new, haven't used it yet. And we've got these Amazon purchased 1, 2, 3 blocks, which generally seem to do pretty well for accuracy, but we're going to find out right now. Let's clean them up. Get some of that oil and probably cosmoline off of there. I've already cleaned the granite surface plate with just a little bit of soap and water. Make sure these guys are all cleaned up. So I guess maybe the first thing, I don't know, these might be too short to do the swivel test, but I want to try to see if they pivot about 1/3 in on each side. And it sure does look like this is the pivot point. So that looks pretty good. And the same on that side. Not a bad first inclination. I have this height meter here, height gauge, probably the wrong word. First time using this guy, and I have the stare at last word connected to it. And what we're going to do is set this up to see if we can measure just how flat these guys are. Base point here is a granite surface plate. This is the B grade, which is a workshop, I think. It has been recently calibrated before I bought it, and it's more than accurate for what I'm going to be doing here. I've got the stare at last word. This is accurate to 5/10,000ths of an inch. Each major mark here is a thousandth, and each individual mark is the 5/10,000ths of an inch. So what we're going to do here, I've got this set up, and we're going to test the height consistency across these blocks. So this is right now starting at 6, 7, just about 7.5 thousandths of an inch. And so as I slide this guy over, keeping an eye on that dial, feels like a fairly consistent result. Now let me check the back side of it. And still just in that same, the dial's really not moving much at all. So that looks encouraging. Let's bring the second block over. give this one a try. So in theory, it should be starting at the same place, and it looks like it's about half a thou on this side of 7. Let me double check that. So we're at 5, 6, 7, definitely 7.5 right here. And then when I go to set this guy up, we're coming at 6, 7.5 again. So getting a fairly consistent measurement here. And I'm not seeing much movement at all. Let's flip it over. So we are at just under 7.5. Just under 7.5. So those results look pretty good. And I'm using the 9 as a terrible reference. I see that it goes from 5 to 10. So we're looking at 6, 7, 8, 9. So I'm not exactly sure what those half measurements are. So I'm counting like a toddler. So the next steps, I want to check the calibration of this Starrett precision level. This is the 98Z12, pretty common, relatively inexpensive as far as levels go. I think I spent somewhere over $100 for this one. Looks to be in good condition, no damage. This is a neat feature where you can roll the top down to protect the glass. And then one thing you should do, if you have a precision stone, you can just kind of hit the bottom of this. The best I have is a brand new Norton stone. So you just want to just kind of give it a quick hit, and you should be able to feel right away if there's any nicks. And I didn't feel any nicks on that. So for my purposes, I'm going to move forward with the next step. And what we're looking for here is we want to check that the bubble is the same whether we have the level oriented this way or if we have it oriented this way. And as long as that's consistent, then you know that your level is indeed working properly. So you can do that two ways. One is you could, now in this case, I am not level. The surface that I'm working on hasn't been leveled. And you can see that the bubble here is just to the outside of that. Now, if I use a couple of blocks to give myself a reference, in theory, even though this isn't level, if I flip this around and I get the same reading, then that will tell me that the level is calibrated. So let's put this back right in the same position. And so that bubble, let's see, get it right up next to that block. And you should give this time to settle in. So that bubble is just to the left of that mark. Let's test it one more time on this side. And now I'm just to the right of that mark. So this tells me that this level would need to be calibrated. The next thing we can do here to check for level is to find where on this plate, and it should be at some particular angle, the level actually shows as level. There should be, and it is getting closer. So at this position right here on my level, it is showing as level. And so I'm going to do the same exercise where I rotate it 180 degrees. It should get the same result. And if I don't, it confirms that the level needs to be calibrated. So I'm going to use the same setup I had before. Ideally, these would be a little bit heavier so that I can make sure that I get this up nice and tight against them without moving them, but I'll just be careful. Okay. So I'm in the same position. We can see that the level is not level. So in this case, as I look directly over the top of this, I can see the bubble is exactly on that line here on the left. I have these 1, 2, 3 blocks on the side to kind of mark my location so that I can put this back in exactly the right place. So let's rotate this 180. Carefully slide it back into position. And so what I'm seeing here is that the bubble is just slightly now to my right, ever so slightly. And so I have a 3/8 wrench, and what I'll do is I'll loosen the top locking nut on here. And then underneath that is an adjusting nut. You need to be careful that you're not pressing on the table because it is very sensitive. Looks like I need to come back the other way. So I want to split that difference. And I'm just hitting now the lock nut again, so we'll loosen that up a little bit. Definitely feel like I'm chasing my tail a little bit. Okay, I think we have it here. What we're looking at is I've got the bubble just on that mark. I'm going to hold down my 1, 2, 3 blocks carefully. Pick up the level, set it back down. And we're just about the same from side to side. The adjustment here, I'm going to lock it down on the adjustment nut. And we'll check one last time. And that looks good. So now this level is calibrated. In theory, we should be able to do that now at any position on this surface plate. So I'm going to pick this random position here. Make sure you can see it. And right now, call that about half a line over. And I'm going to hold down my blocks. We're going to rotate it 180 degrees, put it back where it was. And we have the same readout. So now I feel good that this level has been calibrated. So what we're going for here with this lathe, and for, this in theory works for all lathes. The headstock in some cases is adjustable. I don't want to touch that. That can help if your work is tilted up or down, or if it's tilted left to right, you can adjust the headstock for that. I don't know that this one's adjustable. I do know that I don't want to go into it. What could happen, what happens in many lathes, is that these ways could be somewhat twisted in relation to the headstock. And so what I want to do today is we're going to use the level as an indicator of how much twist there may be. So it's not important that the lathe is actually level. It just needs to be in balance or in alignment with itself. And so what we're going to do is check. We're going to use the level as a proxy to see where the bubble is here on the headstock side of the lathe, and then back here on the back side on the tailstock side. And so what we'll do is we're going to place see a little bit of wear, just a little bit of wear right there. That'll be interesting to see if that plays a part. So we're going to place these 1, 2, 3 blocks. We'll set the level on here. Give it a minute to settle out. And we'll take a look. So this is approximately just over 1 full bar this side. So now let me go with that visual image in my brain. Come back to this side of the lathe, set up the blocks, see if we have a similar result. And we do have a similar result. With no indicated markings over here, it is harder to tell. So we might need to adjust a little something here so that I can see the bubble in relation to some of these graduations. what I'm seeing on this indicator is where the bubble is in relation to the graduations. It's hard for me to see exactly where this setup is compared to when I set it up by the headstock. So I'm going to use a piece of tape and I'm going to mark it right at the edge of that bubble. That should give me an indicator as to, in relation to this end, where the bubble is. So let's bring our 1, 2, 3 blocks over here. We'll set them up. Give this just a moment. Okay, so now I can see that in relation to the tailstock, the bubble is in a different location. You can see it too. So if we think about the tailstock as being fixed, there are 4 bolts that are mounting this, the heaviest part of the lathe, down to the stand here at this end. The tailstock end is the most susceptible to movement. So if I know that this is essentially my fixed point, what I'll do is I'm going to move the tape to match up with this point here, and then go here to the back and see how much, in which direction I need to rotate the twist to get it to line up. All right, I have my new mark. Just a minute to settle in. So in relation to that mark, which is my standard, I need to rotate, I need to twist my lathe counterclockwise so that this bubble will come back to the line. So that means I'm going to be putting a shim underneath this right-hand side. Let's do that and see what it looks like. For shim stock, what I'm going to use is a piece of this pallet strapping. It's about 20 thousandths thick, and I will be able to slide it, in my case, underneath the drip tray and above this C-channel, and I'll be able to tighten the bolts back down. One of the things about the bolts, you want to be consistent with your torque. Could use a torque wrench. I'm using my arm as a torque wrench to kind of make sure that it's consistent. And I also have a jack here to take a little bit of the weight off so that I can slide the shim underneath after I loosen up these end bolts. All right, I've got that loosened up. Gonna put just a little bit of pressure on the end. that shim in. Yeah, I'm looking underneath here to make sure I can see it come through the other side, so I have a nice bite of it. Go ahead and lower jack. And we'll retighten. So I've inserted that shim on the right-hand side, 20 thousandths of an inch. We'll set these blocks back up and see if we took out that inconsistency. Wow, that looks really good. I think we nailed it. Let's take a look here and see. You can see it's just lined up with that tape mark. So now, let's bring it back together and see how we look back on the front. Moment, and it's right on. So what this tells us is that the pitch here at the headstock and the pitch of the ways at the tailstock is equal. Before we had just a little bit of clockwise twist. We put a spacer on the right hand side to bring that back up, and so now these ways are untwisted in relation to the headstock. That's good news. It worked. The tape method. So in this video, we've calibrated or tested the calibration of our 1, 2, 3 blocks, and we have calibrated our machinist level. Again, both learning experiences. If you have comments on better ways to do that, I'm all ears. But it seemed to work for me here. We took that calibrated machinist level, brought it to the lathe, and used it as a proxy for identifying, how much twist we have. And I know, because I've gone and taken the extra step, that the work that I did here brought us probably 95 to 98% of the way there as far as taking the twist out. There's more procedure that you can do using a test bar. We're going to go through that in the third part of the video series. But for right now, using the tape method on that machinist level seemed to work out really well. Thanks so much for watching. Again, any comments that you have, please subscribe to the channel. You'll get alerts for any future videos that I will be producing. And if you like the video, please hit like.